Sleep tight. The little room heated much better than the vast chamber from the night before, and soon enough they were all toasty around the fire. The conversation was less subdued than it had been the night before. Everyone looked significantly more tired.
"I'm not really sure what I'll do when I graduate," Rook was saying. "I mean, I couldn't just go back to the farm after spending all this time at the Institute." "What? You don't like farming?"
A little cloud floated around Zeke, mingling with the smoke from the fire. He hadn't put down a cigarette since finishing his meal.
Rook shrugged. "Nothing wrong with farming. My parents are good people and they do important work, but..." He paused. "We're not getting older anymore, and I'm no Cincinnatus. I think if I had to stay on a farm for eternity, I'd go insane. My idea of Elysium is a little less pastoral and more actually doing something."
Nightingale chuckled and nodded, even though she had no idea who Cincinnatus was. "Well, I've got a suggestion," she grinned, resting one hand on the weapon at her side. "When I graduate, I'm going to join the Demiurge. You know, Alenia's special forces. Every day's an adventure after that. Why don't you join too?" Her smile widened. "I've got a friend who's already in. I'm sure he could put in a good word for you, with the way you fight."
"We'll see," Rook said dismissively. "My parents are expecting me to help out on the farm."
"Farming is so lame," Nightingale said, tossing her legs up onto a nearby rock.
"We all have our roles," Rook said flatly.
There were a few moments of silence then, as each waited for the others to speak. Nightingale turned slowly to look at Remy. "What about you? What are you going to do with your shiny new citizenship? You're the only one without familial expectations, right?" Remy looked away, shifting uncomfortably. I don't really know." They waited, but Remy didn't elaborate. "We shouldn't give up adventuring after this." Nightingale tried to look as reassuring as she could. "If we're here, we might as well enjoy Middara's advantages. We could live forever exploring ancient ruins, rescuing artifacts of unimaginable power, saving the world." Zeke looked doubtful.
"Can't live forever if you get eaten by monsters."
"Like that would happen." Nightingale raised her twig-like arms and flexed. "Have you seen these guns?"
"Yeah, we'll see." Zeke rolled his eyes. "There's still one more day left in the mast. Plenty of time to find something big and hungry enough. They'd probably have to eat 5 of you to fill up, though."
"Or 1 rook," Nightingale smiled. Rest came easier the second night, though Nightingale awoke a little sore from all the walking and fighting. They didn't stay long. Another breakfast of trail rations, and it was back to the cave for their last day of the mast. It was a little annoying how their travel distance each day was restricted, bookended with impassable hallways and convenient campsites. Even less faithful to adventuring was the regular presence of the bellicose cubes. Nightingale doubted very much that she would ever see one in any of Alenia's ruins. She couldn't wait for the next fight, but there was no bellicose cube as they proceeded. Confused, Nightingale glanced around the cavernous chamber. "That's strange." Nightingale kept walking forward. "I don't see a bellicose cube. You think we're almost done? I was really hoping to fight a couple more monsters before we finished."
"That shouldn't be the case," Rook replied. "They didn't want any of us to get seriously hurt."
Nightingale skipped further into the darkness. If Rook was right, there had to be another bellicose cube nearby. Behind her, Rook stooped and studied the ruined remains of a silver basin. He scowled and looked back up.
"We'd better be careful. It looks like something happened to the cube. I doubt that the proctors would have intended this to happen."
As he said this, Nightingale screamed. Rook spun around to see her being charged by a huge stone monster. It hit Nightingale with a boulder-like fist, sending her sprawling near a treacherous gap in the cavern's floor. The creature advanced on her, threatening to crush her beneath its massive weight. Nightingale held her weapon up in a vain attempt to block it, but it was futile.
"Nightingale!"
Rook yelled as he darted across the room, his huge frame pounding with desperate fury as he rammed into the creature. He knocked it aside moments before its massive stone arms came down on Nightingale. Rook pulled at Nightingale's shirt, yanking her to her feet as the monster began to rise again.
"Run! We can't fight this without a bellicose cube!"
Rook turned and the group sprinted into darkness. Eventually they came to a stop, panting heavily and hoping they were safe. "Oh boy," Nightingale said, shaking her hands to wash away the adrenaline coursing through her. "That was exhilarating!" "Exhilarating?" Remy caught up to them nearby, recuperating from the sprint. "You almost got turned into a Nightingale pancake." Nightingale nodded and looked back the way they had run from. What was that thing anyway?
I think it was an Earth Loa. It was either not supposed to be here, or perhaps they planned on us having that bellicose cube intact. In either case, we're okay now, Rook grumbled.
Nightingale burst out laughing and turned to Rook. You just saved a princess in distress! So cliché!
I guess I did, Rook said, smiling. I'm glad you're all right.
Thanks to you. Nightingale walked up beside him and her hand shook a little as she slapped him on the back. I should have noticed that wasn't just a pile of rocks.
Rook relaxed. No big deal. That's why you never adventure alone, right?
Nightingale smelled tobacco a few seconds before Zeke stepped up behind her and gave her a look of relief.
Good work. Let's make sure nothing like that happens again, though.
Nightingale nodded and the group made their way back into the dark. They continued on for what felt like hours. Nightingale purposely stayed at the front, determined to prove she wasn't afraid, even after the close call with the Earth Loa. Eventually, she heard something strange coming from up ahead. Hey, I hear voices! Nightingale couldn't keep her tail from swinging about behind her in excitement as she skipped forward. Remy kept up, her weapon held close. You think we made it to the end? Rook's voice came from behind her, sounding matter-of-fact.
Not yet. That isn't how the mast works. Every team has got to go through the gauntlet, and we haven't seen it yet.
Oh, she blushed, wings drooping as she slowed a little, falling behind the rest of the team. The room was quite large, at least 50 feet across. Other teams milled about in nervous-looking groups, keeping mostly to themselves. Zeke pointed towards the front of the room where a group of uniformed proctors waited by the door.
Let's see what's up,
he muttered, striding purposefully towards the front of the room. Some of the other students looked like they'd done worse than their team had. There were lots of little wounds and hasty bandages, but also breaks and untreated gashes and tears. One young man kept himself standing only with the aid of a makeshift splint and walking stick, while another group had one of its members resting between them badly wounded. Guess we did pretty okay after all, Nightingale found herself thinking, following just behind Zeke. The men standing by the door all nodded respectfully to them.
Lord Zhang, Princess Arson,
a spindly proctor with white hair stepped forward to address them.
Glad you made it. What's going on?
Zeke gestured behind them at the crowd. The proctor lowered his head deferentially.
You've reached the gauntlet, the last stage of the mast. Each team must survive a game section of the dungeon, so you're sent through one at a time. If you'd like your team moved ahead in the queue...
No! Zeke and Nightingale answered together in the same exasperated tone. Zeke was the one who continued.
We'll wait our turn with everyone else.
As you wish, my lord. We'll call for you when it's time. They left without another word, quickly finding Rook through the crowd.
You were right,
Zeke grumbled.
It's the gauntlet.
Rook nodded, satisfied.
It was in the study guide.
What exactly is a gauntlet? I guess they don't expect us all to share a glove, Remy asked, chuckling to herself. Nobody laughed, though it was Rook who answered.
It's different for every graduating class, so it's hard to be sure. It's the thing they wanted us to be prepared for most, in case some of the groups were really clever or lucky. The gauntlet is the same for everyone, so every graduate will be ready for...
He shrugged.
Whatever. It's usually the hardest part.
After what we've been through? Nightingale gave Remy an encouraging pat. I'm sure it'll be nothing. We've got this. 2 years of lectures, 2 years of weapons practice and learning magic. She looked up as the heavy oak door opened and another team was ushered inside. That's our ticket to the outside world, to citizenship, to the demiurge, she muttered to herself privately. Eventually, the white-haired proctor approached them. If you're ready, he said, his voice as deferential as before. It's time. The crowd was mostly gone, leaving only the most injured groups behind. We're ready, Nightingale answered before any of the others could object. Let's do this!